The King's Avatar, Chapter 1330 Joint Attack, Audio Source, whooshworldaudiobook.com. Chapter 1330, Joint Attack. Translator, Nomyami. Editor, Nomyami. Could kind tree hit soft mist? Everyone was nervously watching for this, but then heard, with a slink, a blade of sword energy unsheath and arc through the air. Sword draw? This close? Li Yibo exclaimed in shock. Yes, Lord Grim and Vakaria stood so close, and at such a distance, sword draw shouldn't have had a chance to be used. Before the sword even came out of the sheath, it would have probably already been suppressed. However, right now, Lord Grim's sword draw successfully arced through the air in a circle. Not only did Huang Jiexe not block the attack, but he was jumping back to dodge as well, and Kind Tree, behind him, was instantly exposed to the sword energy of this sword draw. Gao Yingji wasn't slow, but it was too late now. Blood splashed into the air, and his advance had been pushed back by Lord Grim's sword draw. How did this sword draw find its way out? Everything had happened too quickly, and no one had been paying attention to that moment. Playback. During such an intense moment, how could they have time to watch a playback? It was unfortunate, but probably only Wang Jiexe was the only other person who understood why sword draw was successful. It was because Lord Grim's weapon was the Myriad Manifestations umbrella. The ribs of the umbrella at the top flipped up into spear form had stopped Stardust Extermination's attack. At the same time, the bottom of the shaft was unsheathed into sword form in a sword draw, allowing Lord Grim to successfully use this skill at such a distance. For any normal blade master, it would be impossible to parry another's attacks and use sword draw at the same time. In other words, this was a pace that was unique to unspecialized Lord Grim, the unspecialized blitz that no one had been able to counter yet. If you didn't experience it personally, then it really was hard to notice. Wang Jiexe thought to himself, already back on the offensive after dodging sword draw's sword energy. "COB, behind you." Quote. At the same time, he sent this message. Schlink. Sword draw appeared once more on the field. Lu Xiaobi didn't even look. His flying swords turned halfway and sent out a wave of sword energy. Behind him, Boundless Sea was charging over. Fang Rui naturally couldn't see Wang Jiexe's warning, and this attack came abruptly to him. It was just unfortunate that this wasn't the best distance for such an attack. Wang Jiexe was in an intense battle himself, after all. A warning was already good enough. There was no way he could help Lu Xiaobi calculate the timing, too. His relatively far distance gave Fang Rui enough time to react. Boundless Sea jumped backwards, avoiding the strike, but Lu Xiaobi couldn't just ignore Boundless Sea and continue attacking Little Cold Hands. He immediately made a decision to advance on Boundless Sea. That was when Little Cold Hands raised his cross and began to cast a holy white light shining like a flame on the cross. "COB, behind you." Quote. On the field, Tiny Herb's 5 members had different views of the field, and it was natural for them to warn others of these sneak attacks when they saw it. Right then, it was Tiny Herb's healer, Yuan Bai King, that saw Little Cold Hands casting. He realized, with a single glance, that Little Cold Hands wasn't aiming to heal, but to attack. This was a sacred fire. Seeing another warning, Lu Xiaobi knew who was behind him. Striking wouldn't be able to interrupt the other this time. He could only dodge, move, turn. Flying swords rapidly dodged to one side. Now, he didn't dare let either Boundless Sea nor Little Cold Hands out of his sight. He was trying to find a good vantage point now. As for Little Cold Hands' attack, he must have dodged it, right? Indeed, he had dodged it, and the sacred fire didn't even touch flying swords. Just as the holy white flame jumped, Little Cold Hands turned and Yuan Baiking realized that something was wrong. Captain. Quote, he never would have thought that Little Cold Hand's sacred fire wasn't directed at Lu Xiaobi's flying swords, but at Wang Jiexi's Vacaria. His incorrect warning not only interrupted the offensive flying swords who was charging at Boundless Sea, but also made Wang Jiexi let his guard down. Damn it. Yuan Baiking was frustrated with himself. However, even if he could go back and redo things, what should he do? Little Cold Hands had such precise control over the timing of skills, able to finishing adjusting his aim at the very last moment of his casting. Even if he had realized that Vacaria was being targeted and gave such a warning, Little Cold Hands would probably adjust Sacred Fire so that it was aimed at flying swords instead. The other acted in accordance to Tiny Hub's actions. He couldn't not warn, but doing so didn't do them any good. The only way would have been to interrupt the skill. Unfortunately, it was too late now. The holy white sacred fire fled, and Wang Jieqi, facing off against the unspecialized blitz, was oblivious to the danger. And Wen Yi's judgment was precise, and the sacred fire vanished practically the moment it fled, but everyone could see how this holy white flame latched itself onto Vacaria's form. Not bad at all. Vacaria's view clearly turned towards Little Cold Hands for a moment, seeming to have glanced towards the young player over there. However, how much use would it be? Wang Jieqi didn't panic at all and didn't make any extra actions apart from the glance he gave Little Cold Hands. He didn't stop either. Vacaria was still doing whatever he had been doing before. Sacred Fire's 3 seconds of silence could be fatal, but for a witch, they used all sorts of magic tools to strengthen their brooms in close combat. They had little to no skills which were directly used to attack. Using tools to strengthen their broom, in the end, the effects were only displayed through normal attacks. In the next 3 seconds, Vacaria had merely lost the enhancements from his magic tools, weakening his attacks. To a witch, this wasn't a fatal blow. In fact, he didn't even need to stop his offensive. Normal attacks. Vacaria had already been using normal attacks originally. Stardust Extermination continued to sweep forth and Lord Grimm swung his Myriad Manifestations umbrella, parry. However, in the moment he parried Stardust Extermination, Lord Grimm's figure suddenly swayed. A seemingly useless action, but like that, a bloom of light appeared in front of Wang Jiexi's eyes. Heat-seeking missiles. Sweep it away. Stardust Extermination had just been knocked to the side by the Myriad Manifestations umbrella. It was too late. Dodge it. Heat-seeking missiles AoE wasn't small, and he was also under the silencing effect of Sacred Fire and was thus unable to fly on his broom. The other member of his team wouldn't be able to get there in time to help. So Wang Jieqi could only watch as the missile plummeted towards him, boosted by the flames it spat and splitting the air with a piercing howl. Boom. The immense mushroom cloud enveloped Vacaria's form at once, and the other members of Tiny Herb could only watch, unable to help. They even had to be careful that they themselves weren't caught up in the shockwave. The 3 seconds of Sacred Fire's silence also ended then, but all of Happy's members launched attacks at that swaying, but still present figure in the smoke. Flash Burst. Furious Dragon Strikes the Heart. WooshOurWorldAudio.com. X1 Extruder. 3 characters, 3 directions, in addition to Lord Grimm who stuck to Vacaria's side. Their attacks disregarded all else. Tiny Herb didn't just have Wang Jieqi. After all, they still had Zhu Bin, still had Gao Yingji, still had Lu Xiaobi, but Happy completely ignored these 3 attackers, even if attacks came towards them. They might not be able to stop these attacks, but they could disrupt them. So long as there was an opening in the opponent's formation, Wang Jiexi would be able to get Vakaria out. All of Tiny Herb's members were infinitely confident in that, so they each chose their quickest attacks. Star Refraction. Gao Yingji's Kind Tree cast out a star card. Roar. Zubin's Angelica bellowed, releasing the knight's AoE taunt skill. Shadow Steps. Lucio B's flying swords immediately split into A8, all swarming forwards to disrupt Happy's offensive. Even Yuan Baiqing's Aweto, seeing that he was being ignored, silently began to cast a hypnosis. Whose skill would be faster? After Star Refraction's star card cracked open, Star Ray shot out, striking each of Happy's members. However, Dancing Rain's X1 extruder had already been released, and attacking the character wouldn't knock the X1 extruder off course. Knocked by the refraction, Soft Mist swayed to the side, but Dancing Fire Flowing Flame in her hand remained on course under her mechanics. Fang Rui once again displayed his cunning as a master of dirty play. Before the star refraction hit, he purposefully turned Boundless Sea slightly, and thus, the attack knocked Boundless Sea back to his original position. Lord Grimm, well, his actions were even more simple. Myriad Manifestations umbrella opened up and he just ignored everything behind him. As for Angelica's Roar, the knight's aggro-pulling skill was the ultimate counter to this sort of focused attack, but Zubin wasn't so optimistic. He had a knight's roar, but his opponents weren't bereft of a method to stop it. Calm and composed, Fang Rui's Boundless Sea immediately stopped his flash burst when Angelica used Roar, releasing a calm and composed instead. All characters in range would be cleared of fear, taunts, and other such statuses. Knowing that the opponent had a Chi Master, Zubin had already expected this. However, this at least interrupted Boundless Sea's flash burst, and that would at least give Vakaria an opening, right? In the yet-to-disperse smoke, Vakaria's form charged in Boundless Sea's direction as expected, but in the next moment, Lord Grimm had darted in front of him. Swerve. Vakaria flicked the handle of his broom, changing direction in mid-air and flying low with the body bowed. Shingcut. With a flash of cold light, Lord Grimm once again flashed in front of Vakaria. Swerve again. Vakaria turned a full right angle. Charged, Lord Grimm skidding in front of him. Swerve again. This time, Vakaria shot upwards towards the sky. There was a humming sound, and Wang Jiexi recognized it as the sound of rotor wings. Lord Grimm had flown up as well. Too slow. Watching Lord Grimm use that skill in an attempt to fly up and block him, Wang Jiexi felt rather incredulous. "Captain, behind you." Quote. However, he soon saw such a warning in the team chat, 4 such warnings, 1 from each player. Too late. Furious Dragon Strikes the Heart Pierce Through His Chest. End chapter. The King's Avatar. Chapter 1331. Forceful. Audio source. WuxaWorldAudiobook.com. Chapter 1331. Forceful. Translator, Nomyami. Editor, Nomyami. Blood sprayed into the air. Everyone could clearly see the way Soft Misty Dancing Fire Flowing Flame impaled Vakaria. How could it be? The crowd stared, dumbstruck with gasps of shock. First consumed by a heat-seeking missile, then pierced through the chest by Soft Mist's spear. This was their most reliable captain, Wang Jiexi, and their most powerful character of their team, Vakaria. Yet now he was hanging from the spear of that disgrace who had promised to 1v3 like helpless prey. What a joke. How could this happen? This couldn't be real. The audience in the stadium couldn't accept what was happening before their eyes, but the match wouldn't wait for them. Soft Mist retracted her spear and Vakaria's Stardust Extermination seemed like it was about to fly up again, but before he could do so, Lord Grim arrived from above and crashed down. Eagle Stamp. Vakaria was sent to the ground. Chi Blast. Boundless Sea had readied a high-level skill, and the Terminalist Chi energy was blasted into Vakaria's body. His magic robe swelled up and blood seemed to spray once more from where Soft Mist had impaled him. The Chi energy silently broke Vakaria down from the inside out, and Dancing Rain's X1 extruder arrived. Vakaria was pulled in, unable to resist. Lucio B's Shadow Step clones flashed in and out, but from beginning to end, no one even really paid the clones any mind. Happy seemed to only see Vakaria. The only attacks they went to deal with were the ones that would disrupt their offensive on Vakaria. For example, Lord Grim landed once more and turned, suddenly shooting a bullet behind him. The bullet flew, heading directly for their cleric, Aweto. He had been so close to finishing that long cast for hypnosis, but in the final moments, Lord Grim had struck him. Boom. The X1 extruder finally exploded, and Vakaria was once more consumed by light and fire. The audience couldn't keep watching, and nor could the members of Tiny Herb, on or off stage. This was their captain, the one that had always led them forth. How could he be toyed with by Happy like that? Formless Phantom Blade. Lucio B's flying swords threw forth a wave of sword light wildly and crazily, cutting through the fire and light. Gao Yingji's Kind Tree also darted into the sky with a broom tornado and then dropped down swiftly. Night Spirit. Zubin activated Angelica's awakening skill, and Angelica, under Night Spirit, used a fair heroic leap, leaping to the other end with an earth-shaking landing. Tiny Herb's 3 members stood steady around their captain, protecting him. But charged artillery. Spirit reaches to the rainbow. That was when Dancing Rain and Boundless Sea simultaneously launched attacks, both using charged AoEs in a pincer attack. Even Angelica's Sighing Wall wouldn't be able to block these 2 attacks completely. These were the awakening skills of Dancing Rain and Boundless Sea, their specialty being that they could both be charged. After charging, their power was immense. No matter if it was the explosion that charged artillery created or the eruption of chi from Spirit reaches to the rainbow, neither of these were something that a shield could block completely. Dodging was a priority, but what about their captain? Would he have the time to dodge this wave of attacks? Dodge. In the Team Tiny Herb chat, an order appeared from their captain, clear as crystal. Everyone was mentally jolted back to clarity, and the Tiny Herb fans in the stadium began to cheer once more, and this was just an order. Tiny Herb hadn't even done anything yet. However, if that's what the captain wanted, then they had to dodge. Zubin, Gao Yingji and Lucio B all scattered in their own direction and prepared to counterattack in accordance with their own observations and judgments. Wang Jixi's Vakaria had also raised his Stardust Extermination. Happy really is bold. Quote, in the broadcasting room, Pan Lin's comment was thus after he had finished admiring Happy's performance, wide-eyed in surprise. Directly choosing Wang Jixi as their main target was a bold enough strategy from Happy, but what was shocking was that they were carrying it out pretty well. It's rare to see someone who can place Wang Jixi at such a disadvantage. Pan Lin noted. Perhaps he's the only one. Li Yibo replied. Pan Lin naturally knew who Li Yibo was talking was Yishu. There was only Yishu, the Yishu that had been at the peak of glory when Wang Jixi had only just joined the alliance. Compared to the legend of 3 consecutive championships, Wang Jixi was a mere best rookie in Season 3. It was impressive that he didn't hit Rookie's block, but faced with the one who erected a dynasty of 3 consecutive championships, it was nothing. One, an ultimate god that had dominated the heavens like the sun, and the other, simply the most talented of a bunch of newbies. Against Wang Jiexe, what did Yishu have to fear or worry about? Nothing. Nothing at all. Happy could execute such a bold plan of attack, because this member of Team Happy wasn't someone who feared and respected Wang Jiexe like most players. Attack. Only relentless attack. When Zhu Bin and the other two scattered, Wang Jiexe noticed that Happy's characters didn't react. They continued to fixate on the center of the pincer attack, on Wang Jiexe's Vacaria. Wasn't this a little too stubborn of them? Wang Jiexe was surprised. Happy seemed to have set killing him as their ultimate goal. Were they not going to consider the result of this team competition any longer? Otherwise, why would they play in such an unbalanced way style? Why would they be so relentlessly stubborn in focusing their offense on him, even at such risks? Their attacks might be successful, but they'd pay a higher price to do so. Had they not thought of that? Or, perhaps, had they thought of it, but were ignoring it? Wang Jiexe's Vacaria had already hopped onto Stardust Extermination, prepared to escape the terrifying attack Happy was launching. However, that was when Yishu Lord Grim and Tang Rose Soft Mist charged over. They had done nothing when Zhu Bin and Co. had escaped, but when Vacaria moved they immediately acted. This wasn't a good situation at all. If they came back to save him, then they would be hit by the 2 awakening skills. If they didn't, then there'd be little chance he could throw the both of them off, and those 2 skills were about to arrive. Was having the 3 of them dodge a bad judgment call? Should they have gathered their strength to break through one side? In that moment, many thoughts flashed through Wang Jiexe's mind. This match, the simple map, had come to a situation that was rather complicated. The practice they had put into using this map's terrain to their own advantage had been for naught. The battle had erupted here. If they purposefully went to use the strategy they had originally planned with the steps, it might just have the opposite effect. But at least they had to figure out their opponent's strategic intentions. Boom. The explosive power of the charged artillery was immense, and the thunderous boom blanketed everything. Meanwhile, Boundless Sea's spirit reaches to the rainbow seemed to have been charged until it became tangible, finally blasting Vacaria as well. This time, he failed to escape. WuxaWorldAudio.com. Happy's members were more or less completely ignoring the other 3 members of Tiny Herb, fixated on Wang Jiexe. This definitely wasn't normal for any match. But this time, Happy had finally paid the price for such an unbalanced arrangement. Zhu Bin and Co., realizing that they had been ignored, turned back to counterattack and more or less repaid him for the damage Happy had dealt to Vacaria in full. Isn't Happy being a little too bull-headed? Pan Lin called out, unable to comprehend their thought process. At first, their encirclement of Wang Jiexe really was very spectacular and successful, but this time, this was clearly an unequal trade. However, Happy still stubbornly tried to take out Vacaria first, and what they traded for that was the advantage they had worked so hard to build up. Happy is truly too naive if they think it'll be so easy to defeat Tiny Hub's ace. Ruin Cheng laughed, as if having completely forgotten how his soul had practically left his body when Wang Jiexe had been beaten down. Happy is really being very forceful today, Li Yibo noted. Hey, so this style is called being forceful. Maybe we could use a different adjective, like reckless. Ruin Cheng's brain, particularly clever when it came to hating on Happy, once again got to work. Have you two noticed Fang Rui's performance today? Li Yibo said. Fang Rui. Boundless Sea? The two were both deep in thought. Don't you two think that today's Fang Rui is particularly not Fang Rui? He hasn't done any dirty sneaking around, ambushes or strange tricks. Today, he hasn't used the style he's used to. Today, he's fighting openly and directly like a normal Chi master. Li Yibo explained. Is he perhaps planning on changing styles again? Ruin Cheng considered. I don't think so. I think it's just because their offensive strategy today requires him to play such a role. Li Yibo analyzed. Offensive strategy? What offensive strategy? Ruin Cheng laughed. Risk everything to wipe Wang Jiexi out? Li Yibo replied. Hey, Ruin Cheng laughed again. Too bad that this is a team competition. Defeating one person doesn't mean defeating the whole team, no. No matter how central to the team. With this recklessness, I'm really curious how many of them will be left when they finish executing this offensive strategy of theirs. How many will be left? It almost seemed like Happy really didn't care about this. Attack, relentlessly, furiously attack. Anything that didn't affect their offensive against Vacaria, they ignored it, even if it would harm their characters or send them into a danger zone. Rising Dragon soars the sky. Flash burst. The last time. This was the last time. Boundless Sea sent his chi energy into Vacaria's body, and then the dragon condensed from the magical energy of Rising Dragon soars the sky roared as it crushed Vacaria between its jaws. A net of sword energy instantly unleashed itself onto Boundless Sea. Fang Rui didn't seem to care about his own life, simply turning around for the last time. He saw Zhu Bin's sword slam down against Soft Mist's head. The magical energy swirling around her instantly dispersed. He saw the ground approach rapidly, but he could no longer quick recover. He saw Vacaria, far off, encircled by the magical energy of Rising Dragon soars the sky, which exploded along with the chi energy that had injected through Flash Burst. End chapter. The King's Avatar. Chapter 1332. A New Future. Audio source, WuxaWorldAudiobook.com. Chapter 1332. A New Future. Translator, Nomyami. Editor, Nomyami. These guys actually did it. Under the eruption of Rising Dragon soars the sky and Flash Burst, Vacaria's health was finally wiped out. Their healer couldn't make it in time to provide support and Vacaria fell without resistance. However, Happy had also paid a high price for this. Soft Mist and Boundless Sea, as they dealt this last blow together, had been killed by Tiny Herb's furious offensive. 3 characters wiped out at the same time? This was truly a rare and devastating trade. The entire stadium was sent into shock. The 3 in the broadcasting room were speechless. Bang bang. 2 gunshots. In that moment, even the players on the field were stunned, their rhythms slowing. Only one person was still doing as they should. In the face of such a devastating situation, he hadn't been affected in the slightest. He didn't even spare a glance for the 3 fallen characters before his character switched targets and charged. Lord Grimm's 2 gunshots had been aimed at Gao Yingji's kind tree. Naturally, they wouldn't have been able to successfully execute this sort of kill without seeing the opponent's healer. Tiny Herb's Aweto was being blasted by dancing rain to the point where he was completely incapable of acting. Happy's little cold hands, on the other hand, was being knocked witless by Gao Yingji's kind tree. The kill had only just happened, yet Yi Xiu's Lord Grimm had already turned his fire towards his next target. With bullets on the way, Lord Grimm used movement skills to flash to kind tree's side. Gao Yingji was a little out of it because of what had just happened and was easily blasted into the air by Lord Grimm. Everyone snapped back to reality, seemingly only just realizing what had happened on the field. Wang Jiexe, Vakaria, Tiny Herb's core, the strongest part of their team, had been destroyed by Happy. The stadium went silent. No one had any grasp of the weight of the 1-for-2 trade. The audience only noticed one thing: Vakaria had fallen. Wang Jiexe was out of the match. What now? Such a thought took over the hearts of countless fans. With Wang Jiexe gone, they were lost. They were used to seeing Wang Jiexe lead Tiny Herb to victory, vying for the championship cup year after year, season after season, match after match. From the third season, when he took the role of captain onwards, the regular season, the playoffs, sponsorship matches, sparring matches, exhibition matches, Tiny Herb's 398 matches, their captain Wang Jiexe was always present. No matter when, he would be on the field to lead his team. No matter when, so long as he was there on the field, everyone would feel secure. But now, Wang Jiexe was the first to be sent out of the match. In all these years, it wasn't that no team had ever tried, it was that no one that they could remember had ever succeed. But now, in front of their very eyes, the one thing that had never happened in all these years had, and in their home game, too, executed by a team that was new to the alliance. The match isn't over. On the screen, in Tiny Herb's team chat, a message suddenly popped up. After Kind Tree had been sent flying by Lord Grimm, Gao Yingji was the first one to clearly understand. Their captain had been killed, but the match wasn't over. In the current situation, Tiny Herb's Wang Jiexe, his Vakaria had been wiped out, but they still had Zubin, Gao Yingji, Lu Xiaobi, and Yuan Baiking on the field. Their sixth player Liang Fang had also switched in automatically. For Happy, two of their characters had been killed and their sixth player Qiao Yivan had been switched in. Currently, only Yi Xiu, Su Mucheng and Wen Yi were there with Gao Yingji and his teammates. Their captain was no longer there, but Tiny Herb still held a clear advantage in numbers. They couldn't just stop and stare. Happy, over there, was at a disadvantage, yet their performance was still as stable as ever. Yishu had immediately saved Little Cold Hands, and Su Mucheng's Dancing Rain was still blasting their healer, Aweto, as she ran to regroup. It's a 4 versus 3 right now, and we hold the advantage, Gao Yingji told himself again and again. But, what should they do? After telling himself that, he then questioned himself. Should he be making arrangements for what they were to do next? Gao Yingji knew of the expectations his team had of him, and the future his captain hoped he could shoulder. He always worked hard for this, yet when this moment was placed in front of him like this, ever so abrupt, he floundered. After he sent that message, "The match isn't over," he didn't know what to do next. This shouldn't be. Even if he were just a normal team member, he shouldn't feel so lost, so drift. He had to do something. You're going to be the one to shoulder Tiny Herb's future. His captain's voice echoed in his ears ever so clearly, yet the current him was unable to shoulder such responsibilities. He couldn't even do what he had to do on the field like a normal player. With Vakaria dead, Tiny Herb's morale has been severely impacted. Even the commentator, Pan Lin, could see what state Tiny Herb's players were in. After Vakaria had been sent from the match, they had lost their way, flailing in the match without direction. They had the advantage in numbers. Their opponents were right there in front of them, but it was Happy's 3 that had managed to adjust first, and it was Happy's 3 who took the initiative to attack. Tiny Herb won't just lose like that, will they? The difference in the states of mind of the players had Pan Lin doubting Tiny Herb despite their advantage. Not everyone, Li Yibo said, abrupt. What? Pan Lin didn't get what this was referring to. Zubin. Ruin Cheng yelled. Wang Jiexi really had been sent from the match by Happy. This was shocking, but fortunately, it hadn't been without dire consequences for Happy. 1 for 2. Happy had killed off their opponent's core player, but Donso had sent themselves into a disadvantage in numbers. Their actions didn't seem worth it. However, Ruin Cheng soon realized he was wrong. From the reaction of the audience and the players of Tiny Herb, he finally truly understood what Wang Jiexi was to Tiny Herb. He was no normal core player. He was their heart, their foundation, their hope, their confidence. Anything that they need to continue fighting, Tiny Herb only had because of Wang Jiexi. And now, he had fallen. What he left to the players on the field was shock, the unknown, the sense of being lost, anxiety. However, there was one exception. Zubin, a player who debuted in the 6th season and transferred to Tiny Herb from 301 Degrees. He had been a part of Tiny Herb for 1.5 years, seeing great improvement and even becoming an all-star, becoming Glory's #1 knight. He adapted to Tiny Herb well, but, in the end, he transferred over. He had only been a part of the team for 1.5 years. Compared to the players of Tiny Herb who were born and raised there, his dependence on Wang Jiexi wasn't that strong. When Vakaria had fallen, he felt the same shock, but he didn't lose his cool, nor did he stop. He had dealt with soft mist and had prepared to continue this offensive, but he hadn't expected that all his teammates would suddenly stagnate. Zubin had intended to team up with Gao Yingji and gang up on Little Cold Hands. So long as they got rid of Happy's healer, then their victory was pretty much assured. Who would have thought that Happy would adjust themselves even faster? Yishu's Lord Grimm swiftly came back to support, and Suma Chung's Dancing Rain also hurried over to regroup. However, what was more shocking to Zubin was that Gao Yingji's Kind Tree had been easily blasted away by Lord Grimm. Angelica, having prepared to charge over and help him, could only stop. Then, seeing Gao Yingji's message, he thought that there would be some sort of arrangement forthcoming. WuxRWorldAudio.com. Though he had only come to Tiny Herb 1.5 years ago, he had been named vice-captain. However, Zubin knew with clarity that Tiny Herb's future captain was Gao Yingji. He was certain to be the one who would take up Vakaria and continue Tiny Herb's fight after Wang Jiexi abdicated from his position. As for Zubin, he would always be a supporting character. Zubin wasn't that ambitious and didn't have any complaints about this arrangement. After Vakaria was defeated, the match would go to Gao Yingji's control, so he was still that vice-captain, the knight that would stand by his king. Yet after Zubin saw Gao Yingji, the one who should take over, typed that message into the chat, the other had fallen silent. In contrast, Happy's 3 players adjusted themselves decisively, swiftly removing themselves from the devastating trade and beginning to counter-attack. Boom boom. Dancing Rain's missile soared over. No matter how lost Gao Yingji was, his instincts as a pro player were solid. The opponent had attacked, and if he didn't know to dodge, then he deserved to die. Following Happy's attacks, Lucio B and Yuan Biking started waking up, facing the current situation with a more focused mind. They still had the advantage. That was obvious to them. But, what should they do next? Everyone looked to Gao Yingji's Kind Tree. Tiny Herb had always revolved around their witches. Their strategy and playstyle revolved around the witch. They need a hero to guide them. The Tiny Herb of the past only had a Vakaria. He was so dependable, always there to guide him on the battlefield. But now, they also had a Kind Tree. The dual witch arrangement made him feel like they had 2 safety nets. However, everyone knew that this was merely a transitional period, slowly shifting the core of their team. Wang Jiexe, debuting in the third season, was coming to the end of his pro career. Of the talented players debuting in the same season, Zhao Yang had already retired and Yang Kong had abdicated from his position as ace, changing playstyles. Only Wang Jiexe remained the way he was on the very first day, shouldering the entire team, allowing them to lean on him. But now, it was time to switch players. From today onwards, another would hold up this team. Ying Ji. Lu Xiaobi called out in the team chat. They were doing their all to avoid Happy's attacks. Though it was 4 against 3, they need some sort of team tactic. They need someone to lead them into battle, and that person should be Gao Yingji. But what should I do? Gao Yingji gazed at their opponent, their numbers depleted yet still closing in. Yishu, Su Mucheng, even against Tiny Herb, who had won 2 championships, they were still the best partners on the field. Could he do it? Gao Yingji gazed into the distance as if his and Team Tiny Herb's new future was over there. End chapter.